Welcome back to the After Everything podcast. I'm your host, Jason Khalipa. On today's episode, Gabe, Giannis, and I, we dive into it. We talk about what's on our mind. We talk about questions that you've been sending us online. And I really enjoyed this episode. I always enjoy these episodes. This week, it starts off with us talking about an emergency medicine course that I took, lessons learned, things I'm thinking about for the future, which then stems us into, our craziest situation that's came up for us. I talk about one that came up a year or two with my family and I. Definitely a crazy situation that I hope never happens again. We talk about that. And then finally, we go into, gym owners, coaches, a lot of value for you guys. We talk about different things that are coming up here at NCFIT. And for athletes, we, of course, dive into fitness. I love chatting with Gabe. We always have fun stuff to talk about. I hope you enjoy his episodes. If you missed yesterday's Alan Galani episode, you got to check that one out. This guy's an incredible athlete. At the top of his game, at 49, he is an incredible human being. He has a bunch of mindset tips and tools and lessons that he's learned over the years competing professionally that I really think added value. So make sure you check out yesterday's episode, enjoy this episode, and make sure you're checking out the other Coffee with Khalipas. I hope you and your family are doing well. Keep training hard in the gym, keep getting after it outside the gym, and let's dive into a great episode with Mr. Gabe Giannis. Let's go. All right, brother. We are live. We are recording. I'm talking to you live from our Campbell location, and ready to rock and roll, man. How's the morning been for you so far? Or actually, it's like midday over there, dude. What time did you get up at? Like 9 o'clock or what?
It's 10:20, so definitely been up for a few hours. It's still morning though. Definitely still morning.
Yeah, same here. I got I got my water, I got my coffee, ready to rock and roll. Dude, so I'm sure there's a bunch of stuff we could talk about. Last week, we talked about my first jiu-jitsu tournament, talked a little bit about customs and border protection. I thought it was a really fun episode. If you didn't check that one out, make sure to go back to last week and check that out. Also talked a little bit on Coffee with Khalipa about overcommitting, which I thought was good. And this upcoming week, if you're listening to this just on this last Monday, the topic of conversation was in relations to leaving no doubt. And that was inspired by my jiu-jitsu tournament as well. So make sure you check out some of those things. It's cool little snippets. And dude, so last week I took my first IFAC, individual first aid kit course. And basically what the inspiration was is that I work with the local police departments here quite often on fitness. And typically they'll also take me through, and I've worked a lot of firearms training with them. But in this particular case, I wanted to know how to react at like a first aid situation. In particular, just anything you could think of, right? When you think of emergency first aid. And so I have this first aid kit in my car called an IFAC, and it has a bunch of shit in it, but I didn't know how to use it. And so I took a course this last weekend on it, and it was really eye-opening to me about how even just a little bit of education on something can make you feel so much more comfortable on how to utilize that tool, even if you spend 4 or 5 hours on it. So anyways, I want to talk a little bit about that, lessons learned, and kind of go from there, dude.
Yeah, I mean, that specific first aid kit or the course I hadn't heard of, but I'll definitely look into it. We talked about the sheepdog course that I took a couple months ago, and part of the requirements, like stuff that you had to bring to the course, was a tourniquet. So going into it, like I did a little bit of research. There was a whole bunch of different tourniquets, and it's funny because like some of the reviews, like there was ones that were a lot cheaper than other ones, but then like makes sense, like reading the reviews, there's like, you probably don't want to skip
this one breaks
a tourniquet, right? Yeah. So we ended up buying a tourniquet, learning how to use it, and now it's something that it's always in my backpack. Like it's in my carry-on bag. It's in the backpack that I take when I come to California. It's in, it's usually in my car. I just have it at all times. And it was funny because when I told one of my friends about it, they kind of thought it was crazy because, a situation that you would need a tourniquet for is a really bad situation, right?
Really bad situation.
It's worst case scenario. And I think it's one of those things where, you'd like to think that that kind of stuff will never happen to you or around you. But it's also one of those things that if it ever were to happen, not being prepared, because a tourniquet, I mean, it's tiny. It takes zero room in my book bag. It doesn't impede anything. But it's there, and I know how to use it. And to your point, I don't know if it like consciously gives me a sense of like, you know, feeling more comfortable out there in like the crazy world we live in. But I just think that it's something that's so small and took relatively very little time, little expense, that can go such a long way if it were to ever be the case that I would need to have it handy and be able to use it. Like, you know, not to exaggerate or be dramatic, but it could literally save the life of a loved one that I'm with, right?
Oh yeah. Dude, you know what's funny about the tourniquet in particular is that I mean, you're spot on. And I think one of the things I recognize from this course I took is for me not to have a false impression on my skills. It is something I was thinking about as I was going through it, meaning like, for example, I've done self-defense courses and you spend 3 to 4 hours working self-defense. And then all of a sudden, you know, it gives you this false perception that if you're in a self-defense situation, you can defend yourself. Well, yeah, you probably learn some new skills, some self-awareness and whatnot. But let's not kid ourselves. We're not experts in that. But with the tourniquet in particular, just at least knowing how to apply it, specifically, even if you had to apply it to yourself with one arm was pretty interesting. How to store it was cool. And then what types there are. And one of the things that I didn't realize, so the tourniquet that we were working with a variety of them, but in particular one we had, and I'm sure yours is probably similar, it had almost like a pencil looking thing. And then it was like almost, and like a belt that's like a Velcro type belt. And then basically after you apply it tight, you then spin the pencil, for lack of a better term, and it goes into a clamp. Is that kind of the one that you have?
Yeah, yeah.
It weighs about maybe 3 ounces. It's super light, super simple. And pencil might not be the best term, like plastic stick might be a better term. But what I didn't realize, and we were working on these other ones, is do you know voodoo floss? You know what voodoo floss is, right?
Yeah, of course.
Dude, I didn't realize that voodoo floss, like the one that you use for your muscles to kind of like restrict blood flow and then get it back. I hadn't put 2 and 2 together that that's actually a really good option as a tourniquet if you didn't have the other option. This is the one, it's like a little basically rolled up ball of rubber, more or less, that you could utilize. And it's a little bit thicker than maybe the ones that you'd use for like voodoo flossing. But I just thought that was interesting that you could use that as long as you're tightening it down and then clamping it and as a useful tool. So that was an interesting takeaway. One of the other takeaways I had was that obviously if you don't have a belt, if you don't have a tourniquet, if you don't have a voodoo floss, you could have used a shoelace. I thought that was kind of interesting to think about. But one of the takeaways that he was saying is that he asked me, he goes, how long can you leave a tourniquet on for? And I said, you know, maybe 20 to 40 minutes at the most or whatever. He goes, well, it depends on the thickness of the unit itself that you're applying to the area. So if you have a thicker, unit, like one of the professional tourniquets, you could leave that on maybe for up to, I don't know, an hour, let's just say hypothetically. But if you were using a shoelace or something more thin, you can't keep it on as long because it puts too much pressure in a specific area and it ruins the veins. So I thought that was an interesting takeaway that I hadn't thought through before.
How did you, like, what prompted you taking this or having the kit? Was it like a specific thing?
How did that come about? Because in my car, I have some stuff. And one of those things is like this individual IFAK. It's like this, like, I don't know, it's like this pouch. And when you open it up, on the left is like things for like blood. And on the right is like pressure dressing. And there's like different types of things. So you have like these chest wounds, right? So let's just say you're having a sucking chest wound and you need to apply some type of like sticker or unit. There's that, right? And then there's also this other side where you have like the gauze that has like the quick clot in it, and then the turning kit for like bleeds. And so it had all these tools in it, and I didn't know how to use them. And I'm like, dude, well, why would I have these tools and carry them around with me if I don't even know how to apply them? And that was what sparked me reaching out to a buddy over at the police department and taking this course from him. And he showed me videos and all kinds of stuff. It was a really good takeaway. And I think for anybody who's interested in emergency first aid, it was worth the time. But my major takeaways were, how to apply a tourniquet and how it could really save somebody's life if you're able to, especially if it's if it hits one of your major arteries. And the other was how to apply like, some pressure dressing and whatnot, and then how to apply these stickers and how you could utilize duct tape and different things to do it. But as I left, I reminded myself, I'm not an expert. I just got some basic information and I need to continue to learn that if I actually want to be able to apply it under stress. It's one thing to do it on a mannequin or whatever. It's another thing when shit's hitting the fan and you got to revert back to your training, I haven't had enough training to feel that confident in it.
Yeah, I think that's another thing that's important to keep in mind when it comes to, a lot of these things that you'll learn once and then hopefully not have to use ever. So you're probably not revisiting it or thinking about it on a daily basis. It is important to have some sort of reminder to revisit, that information, because, 10 years from now, if, hopefully you never have to pop that kid out, you don't have to think about this stuff. Like, is that knowledge that you learned that's fresh in your mind right now going to still be fresh in your mind? Probably not, but it's not like 10 years from now it's going to be any less important. So yeah, I mean, that stuff's super important, man.
Yeah, it was just another step in the direction of like constantly trying to educate myself on different skills. And I think that for people listening, it's worth exploring. And if nothing else, you could probably just look up some YouTube videos and order a tourniquet online. That in particular, some of the other stuff, talking about how to apply some of these dressings and push in and whatnot. Maybe not everybody would even feel comfortable doing that because some of it's pretty gnarly, right? But anyways, I thought it would spark some conversation, at least for someone listening. It's worth talking about. So one of the other things that came up this week.
Before we move on, I'm curious, Jay, what's like the gnarliest first aid situation you've ever been like in the vicinity of that you remember? Anything crazy in the gym or out of the gym?
That I've been in the vicinity of, I've seen, so I was on Highway 5. Now this is interesting. So between Southern California and Northern California, there's a highway in the middle of California called Highway 5. And on that 5, people go relatively fast. It's straight, it's open, it's like a desert, more or less. And we were driving behind this car, and it was like an expedition that was loaded with a lot of people. And then on the back, it had like a tow hitch on it, but not a trailer, just like a hitch it was loaded too. And I remember we had passed by it earlier or something. I looked at it, it was like, wow, that car's really riding, like in my terms, like, oh, that car's riding dirty, because it was pretty low. And so sure enough, somehow this car passed us, and it was probably going maybe 75 miles an hour, fully loaded expedition with a unit on the back of it. And I was just thinking to myself, in my head, I'm like, wow, that's a lot of weight to be going this fast. And sure enough, we're right behind it, and this car's tire blows out, and this car flips multiple times right in front of us. And it ends up on the side of the road. So immediately I pull over, we call 911, of course, and I get out. At the time in my car, I had a little bit of basic first aid kit. I didn't have this first aid, but I had basic first aid. I don't think I had an AED in my car at the time, but I just had basic first aid. And I just wanted to get out and go see if we could help. And that was pretty traumatic. I mean, there was I want to say there was 8 people in the vehicle. And by the act of, whoever they pray, no one was extremely injured, but this car flipped with I'm talking, there was 5 or 6 kids not seat belted in, just in the back seat and whatnot. And there was a little bit of blood. It was a little bit dramatic, but overall, everybody was okay. That was probably the most scary. We've had other things happen in the gym, of course, that were probably worse, but that was the most scary because it was so boom, right at the moment we got out of the car. We're running up to, it was me, my father-in-law, and Ashley, and we were shook for a while, man. It was traumatic.
Dude,
that was ours.
That's crazy. That's nowhere near what I was expecting when I asked that question. That's crazy,
dude. Because when
how long ago was that?
That was probably maybe a year ago. But the hardest part the hardest part was that it was also it was COVID time. It was just weird, man. Because it was COVID, and at that point, people were kind of, maybe it was a year and a half. People were pretty worried about COVID. We ran out. We're like, dude, if we're gonna get COVID over this, fuck it, we got to go. And so we ran up there and we just did our, tried to help. But I could only imagine how extreme situations can get. If you read Tim Kennedy's book and some of this other stuff, this was a fraction of that, because you hear the kids screaming out of they were scared, right? And none of them were actually severely injured, but they were just really scared. When the ambulance and police and everything showed up, they were shocked that no one had seriously gotten injured, because there were so many people packed into a car that really shouldn't have been, and no one was seatbelted in.
Dude, that is wild. I've been very fortunate that I don't think I've ever been, I'm trying to think, I don't think I've ever been in something, remotely as jarring that, you're put in this position where it's serious fight or flight. I've had like smaller little, like you said, like gym related injuries, stuff that like, you're worried at the time and have to call someone in, but nothing compared to that. But I think the interesting point there, and they talk about this in the sheepdog course, obviously, is, you can't really prepare for that elevated state of stress and shock that you'll be in, and how clearly you'll be able to think, how you'll be able to remember the things you trained, how you'll be able to act logically and not emotionally at the time, until you're really there. And you also can't recreate that situation in any way. Like, you just can't, right? Like, it's impossible to recreate. So the best thing you can do is repetition, and just make sure that that whatever it is that you're trying to learn to be able to apply. And this even applies to, competing, for example, like we talked about your BJJ tournament last time. Like, being on the competition floor is something that you can't simulate in practice. Doing first aid in like a real life or death situation is not something you can simulate when you practice. So what you have to do is practice so much that it's not something that you necessarily have to almost consciously think about when, your hormones are elevated, you're freaking out, like you're, shit hit the fan. Like, that needs to be second nature, both in sport and in emergency.
Yeah, I mean, something that I did, and I think we talked about this a little bit ago. So a few of the things I used to do for competing in CrossFit, and then I kind of did the same thing in jiu-jitsu. One of the things I did was I would religiously, like, this is like very common for me. I would try and go into the gym. I think we talked about this. I would take like 3 or 4 shots of espresso. Yeah. I would turn the music up as loud as humanly possible. And I would try and put myself at like the biggest fight or flight mode I could get, and then see if I could still perform. But it really goes down to just like training reps, right? Spending 10,000 hours. That's why these guys who are going out there and doing some crazy things, they get more, they've trained for so many years to get ready for it. It's the same thing in CrossFit or even in jiu-jitsu, right? Like, there's times where I'll be in jiu-jitsu and I'll be rolling and my body will just be doing things before my brain can catch up with it, because I've just trained it so many times and so many reps. And, with first aid, and especially emergency first aid, I can't say that I have that level of confidence, but I took a step in that direction. And, that's kind of like what I wanted to, here's another crazy story for you. I don't know if I've ever said this on a podcast before. This was like maybe 2-3 years ago. It was like heart of COVID. And myself, Ashley, and the kids were walking back from my in-laws' house to our house. And at the time it was probably like a mile. And it was maybe like 9 p.m. So we're walking down the street and we hear this girl just screaming for her life. Let me go. Let me go. You're hurting me. Like, I mean, just screaming at the top of her lungs, just scared out of her mind. Like that type of that voice, something's going wrong. So we're walking and I'm with the kids and I hear this and I'm like, oh shit. I was like, here we go. And so we hear it coming from like down a dark alley. I'm not making this up. And so we're walking. I look at Ashley. I'm like, hey.
You've told me this story, so I can attest to the fact that you're not making this up. Like, this sounded just as genuine the first time I heard it, and it's crazy.
I just look at Ashley. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And that's one of those moments where, like, I mean, you kind of had to make a decision. Like, what are you gonna do? And so I end up walking down this dark alley by myself. Ashley and the kids are like in the street, and I'm walking down, and I don't know what to expect. I just hear this girl. She is going absolutely mayhem. I mean, she is just going out of her mind. And I'm just thinking, okay, she's getting kidnapped. She's getting whatever. So I walk around the corner of this house and it was pitch black. And I see this guy trying to throw this girl in the back of a van. And I'm like, oh boy, this is not good. And sure enough, I think what I said to the guy was like, hey man, like, what are you doing? Like, hey man, like, what are you doing? And he just looks at me. He's like, this is my daughter. She just took a bunch of pills. I need to get her to the hospital right now to pump her stomach. You can call the police and do whatever you want, but I'm getting her in the car and I'm taking her right now. And I was like, oh. And then I looked in the house, and like the mom was trying to get out, and it all added up. And I ended up like just calmly walking back. But that was just one of like, it was just like example of how like things can go so weird so quickly, and just, I don't know why I'm even bringing that up right now. It was just an example of like how shit can hit the fan so quickly. And that one, man, it got my heart rate spiked for like the next like 2 days. I was jacked up. Anyways.
That is wild, man.
Yeah.
It's crazy story. And that was in Los Gatos, right?
Yeah, that was in Los Gatos. It's just, at the moment, if you were there, you would have realized like everything was adding up. And then when you got to the moment where she was like, hey, I'm basically, my daughter's gonna have a drug overdose, you realize like how it all added up. Like she would have been screaming. She would have said, let me go. She would have said all those things. It just, obviously, yeah. Anyways.
I can only imagine what was going through your mind.
Story time for today. So, all right. I wanted to bring up something. A gym owner reached out to me and he brought something up and I thought it's worth discussing. He said that in his area, many gyms in his area actually, the norm in his area is 3 on, 1 off. And that many gyms just have open gym on Thursday and are actually closed on Sunday. And it was really shocking to me because I thought that most owners at this point have pivoted from that. I think when we first started in 2008, that's the way we ran it. And if I'm not mistaken, my first original CrossFit gym that I ever went to, if I'm not mistaken, ran it that same way, where it was 3 on, 1 off type of thing.
Where's the area? I'm just curious.
Nebraska.
Okay.
So, I think from a Sunday perspective, I can understand if it was like a religious, situation where everybody's at church, etc. I could understand how a gym might decide that. But I was shocked to hear that Thursdays they did not provide classes. That was shocking to me. So I thought I would bring that up here because if you're a gym owner out there and you're still kind of shut down on Thursdays and Sundays, I think you just might be missing out on an opportunity. You should at least evaluate why you have that. And if the reason is just because you've had that for so many years, it might be a good time to think, hey, is it good for the business? If it is, we need to kind of do it.
Yeah. I mean, it's interesting and kind of the perspective that I can bring to this, since moving to, you've been here to a small town, right? Like I live super small town, we're an hour south of Austin and 45 minutes east of San Antonio. So around some big cities, but like where I am itself is pretty small. And I was surprised when I first moved here that like, even the most popular barbecue place that people literally come down from Austin to try is literally just open Thursday through Sunday. Like they're not open Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. And I think that sometimes, when you're from big cities, prior to this, lived in New York, lived in California, you're so accustomed to like things are just open all the time.
Right.
Like, it's just the way it is. Like, don't you want my business? Like, why wouldn't you be open on Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, whatever it is?
Right.
So I do think that, sometimes we don't realize that there are still places where that's just the norm. But I agree with you. I think that doesn't mean that, gym owners can't, look to where they are and see if there's an opportunity by offering classes on those days. But it was surprising to me when we first moved here, how many places are closed, not only during the week, but on Sunday, nothing's open. There's very few things that are open on Sunday.
Dude, yeah, look, and every culture is gonna be different. I just think that as a gym owner, I was surprised to hear they're gonna be open on Thursdays, but have it as an open gym when, I just think that every owner needs to look at their business from a variety of different angles. Like when we look at our gyms, we're saying, hey, where is there areas of opportunity? And we're constantly looking for ways to add more classes, add more, et cetera, because with more classes, give more opportunity to get more members in the door. And if it doesn't make sense and you don't have the demand for it, of course, don't have a class because you don't want to, waste your money. But I guess my thing is like, if you're just doing it because that was what you started that way 5, 6, 10 years ago, it might be a good time to have a reflection and just see, hey, is it the right time to add another class, add that 5 a.m., add open gym on Sundays, maybe as a first step, and then depending on the demand, then add classes. And, look, if Sundays are just a hard stop for you, I get it. Sundays around here at our gyms, they're not extremely busy, but definitely in the mornings, they're busy. They're not the most busy day. Saturday's more busy. But if your members are coming in 3 days a week on average, and one of those 3 days for them is a Sunday and you're not providing it to them, that's a little bit of a bummer. So just think it through and just ask yourself, hey, is this a good time to do a reflection? Maybe put out a member survey, see what members are talking about, and maybe add it just on a temporary basis, right? Hey, for the next 30 to 60 days, we're going to switch it up from an open gym model on Thursdays to having classes at these particular times. Based on the demand, we'll see if we go back to open gym or if we keep it the way it is. That's a good next step because it gives you an out if things didn't work out.
I was going to ask you, like, what would be some good recommendations for someone that's thinking about adding classes to add it, but I think you answered it. You hit the nail on the head with, communicate that it's going to be temporary, try it out. I think a survey before the fact is a great tool to just ask your members, right? Like, would you like us to have classes on Thursday?
Yeah.
Let me ask you another question though, that, applies kind of to the gym owner, but also the athlete. What do you think of, the approach where, there's a prescribed rest day, right? Because the reason a lot of gyms started with this 3-on, 1-off model is because, that's what CrossFit preaches in the level 1, right? And
Right.
the thinking is, if you're coming and trying to hit intensity day 1, you're good to go. Day 2 kind of drops off a little. Day 3 drops off even more. Now you need day 4 to kind of like, rebuild, recharge so that you can hit intensity again and you don't start hitting diminishing returns. Is that still valid? And why does that break down for the gym owner specifically?
I think from like a modern era CrossFit gym, or even for that matter, just a modern era boutique training center, I think you cannot schedule rest days. I think that's a fact. Like you cannot tell your members that, hey, Wednesdays are rest days, Thursdays are rest days, Sundays are rest days. I don't think you could do that. I think that the demographic has grown big enough now that they want to have choices. And traditionally, most people, most of the time, are not coming in on that schedule anyways. So I think the idea of having scheduled rest days as a gym as a whole, I don't think works. I think as an individual, if you want to say, hey, I'm going to go in Monday, Tuesday, take Wednesday off, I'm going to hit Thursday, Friday, take Saturday off, etc. That's your individual choice. I think it can make sense for sure. Like Sundays are probably my least training volume day, just by the way that my schedule works out, where for the most part, I do self-defense Sundays with the kids. So it takes a little while for me to train them. I'm getting in movement because I'm training them, but I'm not really hitting it that hard on Sundays generally. But I think that as a gym owner, this idea of like having a scheduled rest day just doesn't align with the business needs. The business needs should be, hey, we're going to provide premium classes every day. We're going to provide solutions for people. And then over time, if you see your classes aren't having demand, of course, make adjustments. But that's where I'd start.
Yeah. I think that as an industry, sometimes we shy away from looking at the F45s and Orange Theories of the world because, we see them as kind of lesser, right? Like we're doing this thing that we kind of put on a pedestal, whatever that is. You call it CrossFit, you call it functional fitness. And a lot of these chains that are super successful, we almost see as like, well, it's gone corporate or whatever you want to call it. But I think that, one thing to look at them is that they're successful for a reason, right? And I think, it's something to note that you'll never go to an Orange Theory or an F45 and they're going to be like, oh, today's a rest day. Or, oh, today's, just open gym. Like they're running classes all the time and they're going to welcome you and give you a killer workout any day of the week. And I think there's something to be said about that.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think that as an industry, and I think that CrossFit HQ, I do think that there's going to be some changes that are coming down the pipeline. I don't know for sure, but I think with Dawn as a new CEO, I do think that they're going to have some changes coming down the pipeline in terms of data. I'd like to see data coming out from HQ about what the average affiliate generates in revenue and how to help them create a sustainable business model where they're generating $30, $40, $50, $100,000 a month in revenue. Obviously depending on where they live and all, there's so many factors in that. But it would be nice to see the data come out and to find the ones that are generating the higher revenue and to look at what they're doing and to see how other affiliates can model off that. And I'd imagine that most gyms that offer a variety of, more classes than not, have more members than not, are probably more revenue than not, I imagine. But that brings up a whole nother situation, right? Where if you're a full-time, police officer and you also own a gym, it's difficult to have classes all day, every day. It's also difficult to have classes every day. So, that brings up a bigger question of, which one are you going to do and priority wise, but that's a whole nother layer.
Yeah. I didn't mean to plug this now, but I think it's a really good time to, since it's going to come out.
Hey, plug it, bro. Plug it.
Next Thursday, the 22nd is when, if you're listening to this, the day it drops. I think a lot of what you're talking about here, if you're a gym owner listening, is stuff that we're going to cover on this Coach to CEO webinar series that we're doing with our friends at Push Press. So we'll include the link to register in the show notes for this episode here. But I highly encourage that if you want to hear us talk more about, when to expand your team, how to hire the right people, and essentially just kind of go from beginning to end on how to, become this coach operator that a lot of gym owners start as, and really becoming the CEO of your gym business where, you're driving the business, but not doing all the minutia that the business needs to just operate on a day-by-day basis. Sign up for this webinar series. Even if you can't make them live, there'll be recordings. The link will be in the show notes here. You definitely want to catch it. It's going to start on the last Wednesday of September and go for 3 consecutive Wednesdays thereafter. So just wanted to plug that because I think it's a really good way that if any gym owner is interested in hearing more about what you're talking about now, that's where we're going to go into like really good detail. And I think it's going to be a great series for anyone that's interested.
Dude, I love it, man. I love it. I wanted to, highlight a couple things. For me, my shoulder, I went in, I did a ton of like toes to bar or muscle ups or something like that without warming up properly. And it was a good reminder for me. Now I'm having like really kind of open it up and use a little cross ball and my finger to kind of break up some junk there. It was a good reminder for me that I'm not, 21 anymore and that I need to do a better job of warming up. I preach this idea of warming up well. And when I'm in classes, of course I do because I'm actually taking the class. But for some reason, more times than not, when I'm by myself, I don't do as good of a job warming up. And so something that's fresh on my mind is making sure I'm pretty sweaty before I actually start, especially more higher complex movements. The other day I was with Zach, one of our coaches, and he was doing this workout with squat snatches. And he's like, dude, you want to try it? I was like, fuck. I was like, all right, I got to do it. And so I jumped in. I ended up doing reps. I was doing reps and reps and reps at like, I ended up finishing at 190 pounds, which isn't crazy. But when you're doing reps at that for squat snatching, I think that's what tweaked my shoulder. So it was just a good reminder for me to warm up better. And then also post-workout, I've been incorporating more couch stretch work and more quad smashing work on a regular basis. Those are 2 things, I found that when I tell myself, oh, I want to do all these different things, I never do it. So I'm trying to just motivate myself to do the quad stretch in particular for at least 4 minutes a day. And I know that doesn't sound like much, but that's a shitload more than I've been doing over the last couple of years. So 1 minute each side, 2 rounds is the current motivation for couch stretch.
So why did you feel like you had to do it? Just because he asked?
I mean, I feel like I had because he had, so I walk in the gym and he has a bar loaded up at 135. And I kind of started doing a little bit of this, a little bit of that. And then all of a sudden he started and I just watch him get after him. All right. Like he's at 135, he's at 150, he's at 170, 180, 190. And he's doing reps along the whatever. And I asked him afterwards, I'm like, dude, what was that? He goes, oh, I did 30 seconds max reps here, 40 seconds max reps here, 60 seconds, and then finished at 90 seconds, whatever it was. He's like, dude, you want to try it? I want to see how my scores compare to yours. And I'm like, well, naturally, I got to give it a shot. So I just jumped right in. Cole, naturally. And I may or may not have, performed better than him, but
my God,
he's coming up, dude. He's coming up.
You got to get Zach Rains on the podcast.
Dude, we got to get Zach and have him. I talk some shit to him sometimes. So he's
That's
legit.
good though. That's good. You need a little shit talk to get fitter. It's I think one of the key recipes to improving your fitness is having a good training partner that will talk shit and really, really kind of get you going. The shit talk is a essential ingredient.
Oh, dude, I think that for fitness, and then obviously, not to plug jiu-jitsu, but having good training partners in jiu-jitsu is so incredibly important.
Yeah,
because if you don't have people that you could, kind of similar abilities, similar weights, et cetera, it's very, very difficult. Which adds a whole other layer to owning a jiu-jitsu gym compared to a CrossFit style gym. But yes, in regards to that workout, it was just a good reminder for me that my ego sometimes will get there. I think I'll 21 again, just hop in. And I got to remind myself to take a little bit more time, prime the motor. Not to mention, if I prime the motor better, I'll perform better too. So that's something that, I think I need to reflect on a little bit more and make sure I'm adding in. And then post-workout, 4 minute quad stretch, couch stretch. That's where your back foot is up on a wall and your front foot's forward. You can just YouTube it. Look at our friend Kelly Starrett. He talks about it all the time.
So you've said twice now that you're not 21 anymore. How old are you? And if you can remember, was there like a specific age where you felt like there was a difference? Like where you felt like, recovery changed, like that, like just endless energy change. I mean, you still have endless energy, but you know what I mean? Like, where did you feel like there was definitely a switch?
So from
If
an
you can
energy
remember.
perspective, like I feel hella good right now in the last
Oh,
like whatever.
I know it. Your
Yeah.
energy is not an issue, but you know what
Energy is
I
not an
mean?
issue.
Like
Yeah,
not like,
recovery. I think it's recovery and just like the body having, I think honestly, so when I was 30, 30, right? So I'm turning 37 October 2nd. So this will release September, whatever. My birthday is October 2nd. So I'll be 37. And
this guy loves his birthday.
oh yeah, gotta celebrate. But Ava got diagnosed with leukemia in 2016. So that was what, 6 years ago. So after Ava got diagnosed and I was 30, I think that diagnosis and my age started to like compound. And so over the next couple of years, my body started to feel a little bit more beat up. So it was probably like in my early 30s. I think a lot of it had to do with the stress though, of just being in the hospital a lot. So that's ultimately when it started to catch up. But now I actually feel better than I did like 3 or 4 years ago. So I think what happened was, diagnosis, I kind of fell off. Like my training was still fine. I still used fitness, obviously, but it was just a different mindset. And then now I'm more in like a competitor's mindset. My body's actually feeling better today than it did 3 years ago, which is really cool. I'm not complaining.
That's interesting. Just because I'm curious as to what age you felt the difference, but I think it's a unique question for you because the wear and tear of training for the CrossFit Games, and then the wear and tear of like you said, the diagnosis with Ava, like that's something that is really hard to quantify because it's not like you're bashing yourself in the gym, but just the constant stress and kind of the emotional weight of going through that is definitely something that takes a toll, I'm sure. And so it makes sense that around that time is when you felt the difference.
Yeah, and I think anybody going through anything, right? Whether that's you name it, it will take a toll on you physically, right? And maybe even in your business as an entrepreneur, you go through some really stressful times. Like last night I was on the phone with someone for a long time who was not, extremely pleasant to be having a conversation with. And that heightened my stress for sure. And you got to learn how to cope with that effectively. Things like the sauna, cold plunge, exercise. Those are all healthy ways that I've found to kind of release some of that stress. But at the end of the day, you got to be real about it, that stress is going to come into your life and you got to find a way to, mitigate it as much as possible. But that's ultimately where I'm at. But I feel better today than I did a couple of years ago. So for that reason alone, like, dude, I'm jacked up. I'm fired up. I'm ready to go. Like I'm going to hit class today and I'm going to try and beat everybody in it. Friendly, of course. And then, and I'm going to go after it. I mean, and it's it's just the way it is, man. It's good.
This guy's always fired up.
Yeah.
I have a funny story. Well, interesting story because you were just talking about, like being 21 again and kind of getting after it and competing with Zach. So I went back to New York this past weekend, really quick trip. We flew in on Saturday, flew back Monday night, which was a nightmare, by the way, but that's a different story. Our really good friends from the gym were having their wedding. But Sunday morning, so Sunday, the day of the wedding, a bunch of us got together, went back to the gym where, we're all friends from and got after it. And it was funny because going into it, Dennis, who is the owner of the gym and, was our coach when we were all training, was the one that was going to come up with the workout. And we were thinking, like most of us aren't training anywhere near how we used to train before. I haven't done a CrossFit workout in months. So we're thinking we're going to do like a team workout, like maybe push some sleds, do some double unders, have fun a little bit. And we get there and he makes us do 14.5, I think it is. So the one that's 21, 18, 15, 12, 9, 6, 3 thrusters and burpees over the bar. And, but his
were you able to get up the toilet the next day or what?
Oh, dude, it was rough. Today's the first day that I feel like my legs feel okay. But it was just funny. His reasoning for why I thought was perfect. It was like, we're all getting together. It's been years since all of us, like that big of a group, was there to work out.
Yeah.
He was like, the perfect thing for us to do is like the last thing any of us wants to do. he wouldn't tell us what the workout was. And he was like, literally, what's the last thing you want to do right now? And that pretty much ended up being what we did.
That summarized it. Thrusters and burpees, 100%.
Oh, 100%. Especially if you haven't been
on
doing this
Saturday.
stuff, it was a nightmare.
So did you do it on Saturday or Sunday?
We did it on Sunday.
And so today's Thursday. And so just now, are you able to, so were you in that position where, dude, when you just try and like sit down anywhere, you had to like kind of use something to help you up, and like, dude, your ass was just on, was it your butt and your quads that were the worst, or something else, or your chest?
Mostly quad. I mean, it was just mostly quads. It was like 90% quads, like 10% like felt it in other places. Honestly, I thought it was going to be a lot worse. Like, it was definitely bad. I was super, super sore. And it didn't help that on our flight back on Monday, it was supposed to be a 9 p.m. flight that got into Austin at midnight, which wasn't ideal to begin with.
That's already a shitty flight.
But it got delayed. So we got onto the plane at 9:45. We sat on the tarmac because there was a storm for 2.5 hours.
No.
I didn't get back to the house Tuesday morning until 4:30 a.m. And we were an hour drive from the airport to the house, because, I mean, we don't live right around the corner. That probably had something to do with just how terrible we felt for the past couple of days. You know, and Ariel's like 7 months pregnant.
Yeah.
Oh, dude, it was gnarly. But the funny part is, all that being said, it was a lot of fun, and it was just a great like throwback to how times were when we all used to throw down. It was, you know, a bunch of us that got together, didn't have kids back then, obviously, and now had kids, and like the kids were running around the gym. Yeah, and we all did that workout. It was, you know, it was what it was, and it just a good reminder that, you know, we've also, even though we haven't been training the way we've used to, we've all maintained our fitness to a point where, like, it wasn't a problem. Like, sure, I was sore for 2 days, but, like, you know, that's a pretty gnarly workout, and, you know, we got through it okay, unscathed.
Yeah, it just goes to show how you could, like, that compounding interest we talk about.
Mm-hmm.
For so many years, you've been putting in, you know, money into the fitness bank that, you know, you could even not expose yourself to those similar movements for a while and come back to it and still be able to perform pretty well. And I'm seeing that right now on lifts and things like that I've been working on the last couple of weeks. But dude, that's awesome, man. I'm glad you got to go out there and do that. That's a shitty flight back, man. That sucks.
Oh, it's so rough.
I'm heading out your way next week. So I'll be on, actually this week. So when this releases, ADCC just got finished. I'm going to ADCC in Vegas to go watch Mason Fowler, who we've been training, you know, a lot. He's going to go compete, and I hope he takes home the W, and I feel like he's prepared for it. And then next week, dude, when this releases, actually, I'll be in Austin with you. So maybe we got to record something in person if it works out.
Yeah, no, I'd love that. In person, always better.
Oh, dude, we should probably do something with Tim Kennedy, because we're going to be with him, huh?
No brainer.
Fuck, dude. Brilliant. Oh, brother. All right.
I'll tell you in a little bit. We don't have to talk about this later.
All right. Well, hey, guys. So if you're a gym owner out there, make sure to check out the Coach to CEO webinar series that we're doing. I think it's going to be a lot of value add. Also, here with me is actually Jaime. Jaime's been with us for many, many years. I'll actually show you if you're watching this on film. I'm actually at our Campbell office. That's Jaime right there. Jaime is going to be recording vlog style content with us every week. And so he's just kind of giving a glimpse into some of the things that I'm working on personally, and kind of a sneak peek. So make sure to check out on my Instagram and also on YouTube. We're going to start putting out a lot more content, and hopefully it'll be a bunch of value add types things. So make sure to check out YouTube and Instagram for the vlog, and then make sure to check out the podcast show notes for the Coach to CEO. And if you're just an athlete, or not just an athlete, if you're an athlete out there, if you're a coach out there, keep crushing in the gym. And if you're an entrepreneur and we can help you out in any way, hit me up on social. Gabe, always love chatting with you, man. We went off on a few tangents today, but that's when it keeps it fun.
It's a fun episode. It's a good one. Good stories.
Good stories. All right, guys, keep crushing in the gym. Crush outside the gym. Talk to you guys soon.